Hi, guys. I'm Tara Lipinski.
And this is Todd Kapistashi.
And you are listening to Unexpecting, the podcast. So I don't know where we start, but maybe we do a surrogate update. So we did a polyp removal with our surrogate in, goodness, now it's almost 2 months ago. And I think we kind of updated you last when she had it done. And it was like so exciting. We had a timeline. She was going to come out here for a saline ultrasound with Dr. Beck to just make sure that everything looked clear and everything was removed and that we would feel good about moving forward. And as everyone who has been on an infertility journey or through IVF knows, you know, don't plan for anything because something will always pop up. So I was excited, though, that I got to go to the clinic and meet her again. Obviously, we've been talking now and really over this, I mean, it's been months now. We're really having a lot of time to connect just on day-to-day stuff. And she has 3 kids and, you know, it's just really nice to start to bond and have that connection. But we went to her appointment and she's doing the saline ultrasound. I'm in the room with Dr. Beck, and, you know, you can just kind of tell from the start, you know, and I know Dr. Beck so well. And afterwards we were laughing because Dr. Beck's like, I tried to not look at you because I know you know me so well. So I know when you see something on the ultrasound, and I know you're also reading the ultrasound. So she's like, I know you saw what I saw. But unfortunately, it looked like there was still polyp tissue there, that it actually had grown back. I didn't deal with polyps, but I'm sure people that are listening maybe have dealt with them. It's like a minor thing, especially when they're superficial. You just want them all cleaned out because, you know, where you implant the embryo, you want that spot of implantation to be really ready to accept everything. You don't want anything growing there to impede that process. So I saw it when we were looking at the ultrasound and it looked like the tissue had grown back. And then we brought in, like, it was like a 45-minute appointment because we kept trying to make sure we could see that, because sometimes on those ultrasounds, it's like, you know, not super clear, like you're actually up there with a camera. So she just wanted to be sure. So we had someone else come in. We did it again and again. And she's like, I just don't feel 100% comfortable. Like, I see something. And I think that the way it was removed before, just they didn't get to the root of it. So we just made the game time decision in the office. Our surrogate was supposed to be on a plane back in 2 hours. We were going to go to lunch, and that was going to be it. And then we were going to get ready for a transfer, and that is not how it went. So we were really, really, really lucky that Dr. Beck was able to get us in with an incredible OB-GYN that was able to take her the next day for a hysteroscopy and remove it once and for all. And then, you know, hopefully move past this polyp thing. But it was interesting because it was like 2 p.m. and we just sort of decided, well, why don't you just stay with us? You know, you're going to scramble to find a hotel, and, you know, it's so last minute and you have to get prepared for like a mini surgery in the morning. So it was actually a blessing in disguise because, you know, I drove her back. We went and, you know, I did an errand. We picked up food together. We came back and I had some time, and well, of course, I don't know if you can see any of the decorations in this room yet, but it is Christmas decorating time, which is my favorite time of the year. So I, you know, started way early this year, and I don't even care because it's too fun. But I had a bunch of decorations out, and we were just like, all right, let's decorate the kitchen together.
And then Georgie also got sick, so you got to see her maternal instincts, which I think was really nice.
It was, you know, again, like, this was a blessing in disguise because, like, we just did activity, like, bond. It felt like we were on, like, you know, a show where, like, activities and, you know, events are presented to you to bond with someone, and they just naturally did that. You know, we had some fun, and then all of a sudden Georgie got sick and got like a really high fever, and she was just, again, a mom of 3, and they're, you know, all ages. Like, she has some young ones and then she has an older one, but again, you know, as a new mom, it's just nice to have the reassurance from a mom who's been through it, who knows and worries and can, you know, relate to you on all those, feelings that you're having, but then also just, little tips and just being there. She was there, we were taking her temperature. And then, when she woke up in the morning, she was really not feeling good. So we were putting like little wet washcloths on her head to keep her fever down because it was so high at like 104. And, just those moments of a little stress and you're with someone doing that, you just really, it's like a fast bond. So it was nice to really have that time. And then she went in for her procedure the next day. And we've been able to then, hopefully now with the procedure done, Dr. Beck feels confident that I was like, do we need to check again? And she's like, no, I like this, I really feel confident that the doctor will, remove it properly and we move forward, which gives me I sweat when I hear that. Cause I'm like, now I just always want to double check things, but it's hard to do that because I think you then have to be on birth control and she wouldn't be on birth control if she's on the other medicine and all this stuff. So, anyways, we're still sort of moving ahead and just planning, to take a month to recover and then move forward. But,
is there any part of you that felt like, oh, this thing happened and here we go again with the start of complications or?
Well, no. I mean, what it does is it definitely triggers that uneasy feeling. And it's probably like this with any diagnosis you have in life when you're going through a medical thing, where, and it's not a diagnosis, but it's like IVF in general. It's where it's the whole variable thing of well, now I want to check again because when we checked, we did the procedure and then a month later there was something there. Well, you have to trust the process a little because I think at a certain point you can, and Dr. Beck, what I love about her, she loves to test, but there's a certain point where, how you could just keep repeating all of these tests. And at a certain point you have to take that leap of faith, but the leap of faith is, harder. But I think that's what's sort of I'm like, okay, I just hope this doctor got it all. But, after talking to Dr. Beck, she seems so confident about, she's like, this is a minor thing. And when the doctor removes it properly, it's totally fine. And, we'll see an ultrasound before and things like that. But yeah, it's it's always, again, it's when it comes to IVF, you can never plan a schedule. When I finally was comfortable enough to start looking at calendars, after she had this last little surgery. And I'm like, I should never open a calendar. Just wait for someone to call me the day of and be like, it's happening on this day. So.
But I guess this problem was a little bit of a blessing in disguise, maybe because we got to meet her and hang out and you guys bonded. As great as your relationship with Michaela ended up being, we never had that early on kind of bonding time. So
we didn't have it.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, we didn't have it all. It moved so quickly with Michaela that our bonding time just happened through the pregnancy. But it was really nice to have this time. And it that is the one silver lining. And then another one is just again, I'm grateful for, anyone listening when you're, going through this journey. I think it's always you learn from other people's stories and hopefully this story, if someone's preparing for a transfer, maybe they ask their doctor oh, I had a polyp removed. Do we need to double check that, do an ultrasound just to double check that it's all gone? Or, because these embryos are so valuable. You want your team of doctors to be on it and they have a lot of patience. But that's why I don't know. I feel grateful that I got to spend time with Rachel, but also grateful that I have a doctor that is so thorough, because what if we did that, she did the polyp removal and we just went right into a transfer, which I think many doctors would have done. There could have been, an issue there. So.
But that's also just why IVF in this process is so crazy, because there's so many different reasons why stuff doesn't work.
Yeah.
And doctors, think someone about surrogate's great and healthy and everything's perfect, but it's all up to their judgment if oh, the polyp is gone or it's not, or is that going to affect it? There's just a lot of variables.
Well, that's the word, I think, for me too. I think it depends on personality, but anyone who's gone through a difficult journey to begin with, adding variables into a situation is especially for someone like me who's, more type A and a little OCD, where my mind will think of any possible thing and then dissect that and unravel it 6 times and want to, think about it. Like, these variables are terrible. They're terrible for your anxiety. And I think that, for me, it's been I guess just as a human, for someone who didn't have a lot of patience in things, and I hate being out of control in that unknown and having to trust, quote unquote, that annoying thing, like trust the process. But at a certain point, I think I've been forced to just accept these feelings of just, you gotta trust it, but then advocate. So it's like those
I think doctors
two things.
also probably, well, I don't know this, but like Dr. Beck said, she knows you. So I think there is a shorthand a little bit where maybe if she's 50-50 on not doing another surgery or whatever, she probably does it because she knows you're going to want it and feel better if you do. And not that doctors do stuff just for the patients, but I do think, even our pediatrician sometimes, I feel like he's like, I don't know, you could go in and get a test, or you could, do an antibiotic, but maybe you don't need to. So, we think of medicine as these people are all knowing gods, but they're not. They're making judgments too. And I think they probably cater their judgments to the patient
as well. Yeah. I mean, I really do wish we could change that. I want them to be all knowing gods, because that would really make me feel better about all things.
Some think they are, but
no, but yeah. And I think I think Dr. Beck knows me, but I think, also just, she's notoriously known, I think, in the world of fertility to really be thorough on these things and a stickler, which, in the moment you're like, oh, do I have to go through another thing? And then you're like, thank goodness that she's checking all the boxes. So yeah, so I feel like that's our surrogate update. And I don't think it pushes things back too far. It's going to push it back a little bit. But overall, I think we're still trucking along.
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
Some of the hardest moments of my infertility journey happened in between appointments when my care team wasn't in front of me to answer my questions. During those times, I felt overwhelmed by what felt like a million uncertainties, and I didn't know where to turn for immediate answers. What helped me gain a sense of comfort was finding resources and information that I could rely on. Having access to the right tools gave me a clearer understanding of what was happening and made those waiting periods feel less isolating. Today's sponsor, FERRING Pharmaceuticals, is committed to helping aspiring parents throughout their fertility journey. They understand how challenging it can be when you have questions and how important it is for you to feel supported. FERRINGfertility.com offers a plethora of resources, including access to fertility coaches for customized guidance and other tools that make a difference when you need it. Okay, so we're talking timeline. Timeline is something you don't always want to talk about regarding your fertility, but there are some stats that we just can't ignore as women. And I have found that I'd rather know what I'm dealing with so then I can have some control and feel empowered. Okay, here's a stat. Did you know that women's peak reproductive years are between late teens and late 20s? There's even some research that indicates that peak fertility among American women is age 22 with an ideal pregnancy at age 23. And clearly that is not everyone's timeline. And it certainly wasn't the timeline for me. And it wasn't because in my late teens, I had just won the Olympics and that was the furthest thing from my mind. And in my 20s and 30s, I was learning how to be a person off the ice. But then when the time came, I needed to think about my future and I needed to do what was right for my body. So that's why I love to talk about companies like Ritual. And I want to tell you about Ritual's new, their 3-in-1 fertility support. It was designed in partnership with an OBGYN and a fertility specialist, and it uses clinically studied ingredients and clinically studied dosages. And you want to be able to trust the supplements you're taking. And I trust Ritual because I actually took their prenatal throughout my entire journey after much research. And to be honest, if they had this, I would have been on this as well. Why? Because it's rigorously third-party tested for heavy metals, allergens, and microbes for safety during preconception and pregnancy. It's their first 3-in-1 drink mix formulated to support conception outcomes and support fertility health across the board with 3 clinically studied ingredients. Some like NAC, which provides antioxidant support and helps support ovarian health, and CoQ10 to help support follicular health and cellular energy production. Specifically, Ubixum CoQ10, which is 2.7 times more bioavailable than standard CoQ10. For more pregnancy support, also, guys, you can bundle the fertility support with Ritual's Essential Prenatal Multivitamin. So bring the fertility science back to your bedroom with 3-in-1 fertility support from Ritual. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/Tara. That's ritual.com/Tara for 25% off.
The only other thing I wanted to ask you, which I think we've talked about this probably at some point on the podcast, but it came up again a couple weeks ago. You probably don't want to or don't need to talk about the person, but you had told me you were having a conversation with someone who is either they or their husband or sort of saying they like just won't, they're having trouble with infertility and they just don't want to do a surrogate at this point, one of them. I don't know. It's just like interesting to think about that and there's nothing wrong with that. There's religious reasons, people have what they think are moral reasons for not doing surrogacy or just preference or whatever it is. So it's fine, whatever you decide to choose. But, I suppose you went through a period where
I was the person.
Yeah, but your reasons I think were just you wanted so badly to have the experience. Versus like a moral sort of.
Well, I don't even know what the reason
judgment
is exactly, but that's why I was asking you, because I think it's important to get different perspectives, especially male perspectives too, and I guess we never really talked about how you felt about, the surrogate process, but. Well,
I guess I was asking you though, like what advice you'd give to people. I mean, I know again, it's like, I know the answer and probably everyone else does about just sort of, you think it's such a massive thing that you're giving up. And it's not that it's not, but the sort of payoff at the end is so much greater than what you're
and you don't know it in the moment. You don't really know what that payoff is or feels like or how it will feel. So I think that's the scary part because you think it's going to ruin the whole experience. And I think I was that person where I was afraid of going the surrogacy route. No one wants to be outside the norm. And it felt like, I don't know. It just felt like, what I'm going to be like, I see all these people pregnant at the grocery store. I'm going to be the one person that's not pregnant and another woman's going to carry my baby, and what's going to happen with connection and what's going to happen. And it just is like this, it's like your mind spirals. So I really understand the feeling and I fought against it. But the one thing I'd say, if anyone's on that verge listening now, first off, if you don't know me, I guess that well, but like I am the most stubborn when it comes to certain things, like stubborn people ever to just like push, a thing. Like if it's like a physical thing, especially, I just feel like I can overcome it somehow, which is not the case. Like that is just not life and people can't do that. But I just feel like I like to gamble a little bit and I like to like work hard at something. So I always thought with this, like gamble another embryo, work harder, eat better, do this, figure out the problem, like research. And it's like, that is just not how it works when it comes to your health. But I think what I would say to anyone listening on the verge or having those feelings is like, to your point, Todd, of like the payoff. The payoff is so worth it because I think for me, the thing that just immediately changed like overnight, because we had Michaela pretty much on hold. Like we were going to do 2 at once. We were going to try to implant with me and then also do a surrogate because we knew we didn't have enough to gamble on more than one pregnancy with me. After all the ones we were losing. But I remember in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe if I get pregnant, we just, we don't go through with the surrogacy because that was going to be, months later. Because I was still so hell-bent on being pregnant. And then when I lost that 4th pregnancy and I was faced with like, how many embryos we lost, and I probably needed to do another retrieval, and I was 40 years old. And in my mind, I was like, I'm 40. If I was having trouble at 36, like I may go into this because I hadn't done a retrieval in a while. I was like, I could go in and get absolutely nothing. Like we could be now dealing with another problem. And I think that's like anything in life. Like for me, the surrogacy was like a problem. And then when you're confronted with multiple problems, then from that point on, that will make something even harder to get to. I think that's what people should think about in that moment is like, how much are you willing to gamble or willing to push something that may not happen? And then like when those dominoes start falling, what else is that going to affect? Like, you know, if your end goal is to have a family, you can I mean, I did this for 5 years. You can push it so far where maybe we went in and there was just no embryos, you know, maybe, you know, there was just like a different path for us that in the moment felt so much worse. And in my head, surrogacy then felt like an answer. So it was, I don't know. It was like, I felt like for me, it was like like just one of those like aha moments of like, what am I doing? Like this could be 10 times worse. Like you uncover an even bigger problem that you're afraid of. And I think people don't realize that. So they're so focused on like, let's fix this current problem. But like infertility, like time is of the essence and things can happen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, I think for us, like, there's two different conversations. Like, you and I both, there's two camps to me on this subject. It's like the camp of like what you described. And I would say I fell into that too, just like to a lesser degree of, oh, like, I've always envisioned being pregnant and it's kind of quote unquote normal.
Right.
And I want to experience pregnancy. And oh, is there going to be a loss of connection with my child and I because I didn't carry her? And is it weird that like I'm walking around normal while someone else is like carrying my baby in a different state? Like all those feelings. And I think we both had them. And it was obviously much more difficult for you to sort of get past that than for me. But then there is the other camp, which is like a pretty hard line in the sand of sort of a moral dilemma that people have, or a religious choice of like, it just isn't right that some other person would carry my baby. And I feel kind of bad for those people, honestly, because I understand. Like I understand sort of people having religious beliefs and standing by. I mean, it's the same conversation we've had over the last few months with like abortion in the country before the election. Is you can't really convince someone who has these deep, you know, views and thoughts on religion to kind of change their view on that.
Right.
Which I understand that, but man, it just stinks that like you may never have a child because of that.
I think a lot about that because it's like, look, we all have these feelings, right? And in the beginning, it wasn't a religious feeling, but it was like a feeling that like, I was like, I cannot do that. Like I remember after my first miscarriage, like just thinking like, what if I had to do that? And it was like, I cannot, like that is not happening. Like there was not even like an understanding of it. So like, I think I'm with you. Like I feel bad for someone who would be put in that position, you know, like, you know, it's like clearly wrestling with their moral compass on something. But at the same time, I'm so glad I don't have, like, to me, surrogacy is this beautiful thing that like when people are talking about it and you see all these things on Instagram of like, you know, just like the people that are anti-surrogacy, I don't even feel anything. And I'm so happy that I'm in that camp where it's like, I'm like, that is, to me, that is crazy. Like they're crazy to me, but I understand why they have those feelings. But it's crazy because I look at Georgie, you know, our biological child and the relationship we have with her. And I'm like, that is crazy that if I had those feelings, that I would then not have this. She feels like you know, I have many things in my life, but really she is the point of my life right now. And like, it feels like the biggest thing I've ever accomplished. So it's, I feel bad that there's like less options for people that have those feelings. And I also think I wish, you know, you sometimes have to go through something to understand it. And when I actually went through it, it was even less scary. It was less of the things that I had worried about than they actually were. I think it's like anxiety in general. Like my therapist is always like, you know, anxiety is that thing where you know, the place of worry and the circular thoughts is harder than when you're actually going through it. Like you rise to the occasion and you do it. And I think for me, surrogacy was like, not only did we rise to the occasion, but it was like, I was like, oh, wait, what was I so worried about? Like, why? Like, it just didn't feel as strange as I thought, you know, quote unquote strange as I thought it was. But yeah, I mean, one of my friends had told me like her husband would have never agreed to it. So there's a lot of people that just, feel that way. I mean, it's funny. I had to unfollow someone on Instagram recently. It was a person that I had like casually, not a friend, but casually knew in New York. That's what at this point 15 years ago. And like we've all moved on and, obviously we have built a family now, but like I realized I was following her. She was not following me anymore. So she unfollowed me and like in her header was something about like, I would be lying if I knew, but it was like about building natural families, like her convictions around like, clearly IVF and on top of IVF surrogacy. So she probably looked at me like I was, the devil. And just seeing her post, like it's almost hard. Sometimes those people you want to continue following because there's like this weird addiction of like, wow, what are you going to post today? Or like, will I have the guts to just send a message to you? Like I randomly sent a message to, which I never do. Like throughout my entire career, people have a lot to say about me. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. They could call me like the ugliest name and I'll see it on Instagram and just like, it doesn't bother me. But clearly this surrogacy thing is obviously a huge part of our life, but it's also our daughter and part of her story. And it like, I don't know if the mama bear in me just gets like, I get like rage. Like I'll see a comment, like a random one, like literally on my like find page. And I'm like, I should comment and tell them exactly what I think. And I did it once, like a few weeks ago. And it was like terrible because then like all the people then come at you. And I'm like, this is why you never comment. But in the moment, it felt so good. I was like, send. And it felt so good to like put my opinion out there. I wasn't mean, but I was just like, as someone who's gone through surrogacy. But anyways, part of that is like I like wanted to continue to follow this person just to see the post and think like I would have the guts to like write to her, as someone that she knew. So it was like this weird fantasy. And then I was like, I can't stand these posts, so I'm going to unfollow. So now I'm a solid unfollow.
I mean, we've talked about this in the podcast, so I don't know, retread sort of an old landscape, but like if you have that feeling like she does, my stance, my like big picture stance is that's great. Definitely have that. Never go see a doctor ever. Right. Never use contraception ever.
Right.
Like if you have an infection, you figure it out, put it in salt water. Like I just think that, look, I was religious at one point in my life when I was growing up and Catholic and, I appreciate.
Yeah, you were very religious.
I appreciate that. But I also think if you're sort of saying on repeat, like God's plan, like, oh, you shouldn't get a surrogate. Like it's unnatural. It's not God's plan. Like there are so many things that happen in this world every day out of chance, or maybe it's God's plan and we change them and affect them. We see doctors.
Well, you have a broken arm. You're not like, you know what?
Yeah, but
this
even
was
more,
meant to
but
be.
even more than that, I just think even with like family planning, it's like again, if you want to have that view, it's okay. Just like be one of those people that is living like 700 years ago. And if you have sex and you have a kid, you just have to have it. If it has, some sort of,
life-altering disease,
problem, like gotta just figure it out. And I think that's in a certain way beautiful too, maybe.
Right.
But like, don't do both.
Yeah.
Don't post on Instagram about like having a family naturally. I would love to ask her if she's ever used birth control.
Right.
Because it's just, and I know it's not apples to apples,
what's so
but
funny
it's just annoying
that you said that was the comment I wrote to this person, because it was like, she was the Instagram that she put up was just that, this is, IVF and like potential life. And you're interfering with the natural. And I wrote back, I was like, well, every month you have a dominant follicle that like just evolution, like your body is putting its best follicle up, which is crazy. I do love like the science and biology behind like fertility. It's crazy. Your body knows, like it has all these little follicles growing, and then it kind of like knows like this is the healthiest, juiciest, best potential follicle.
But they would argue that's, biology.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, I love the idea of this, but that your body does this. But my point to her was like, it creates this follicle that's like, could be potential life every single month. So like, I hope that every single month you're just not letting that follicle, go to waste. Like this is potential life. Go figure it out. Get pregnant every month you can.
Yeah, I mean, also, but if we're being honest, I think there is a line with all this stuff, right? Like, I don't know, in 50 years, we're going to have bigger conversations about like embryo farms. Will there be just millions of embryos that are frozen for people to like pick and choose? And like, how do we family plan in 50 years or 100 years or 10 years?
Yeah.
Like, there are moral questions to ask. I just think, I don't know. Like, you look at Georgie and it's sort of like, that is God. Again, if you're sort of a God-fearing person, like, how could you not look at Georgie and not feel like what we went through, crazy 5 years, and this embryo didn't work, and that embryo, and that brought this one thing to existence.
Yeah, if anyone's gonna become a believer, it's like after all of that, like she was the result of that.
But I guess my point is I'm not articulating it, but it's all like life is just all these chances and a random series of events that lead to some outcome.
Yeah.
And so I think family planning, birth control, who you meet and have sex with, and if it works, and how you family plan, how you use birth control, it's all random and leads maybe to a baby and to life and maybe not.
Yeah.
So like that's the same process we went through with Georgie.
Yeah.
Like Georgie, there were embryos before Georgie we tried that didn't work. That could have been people that weren't. And that happens millions and billions of times per day on this planet.
Well, what's interesting about that is just like, I think it's anything in life of just like trusting. I mean, but it's like, to your point, you've never been, and I haven't really, like, it happened for a reason. Like, that was a really hard phrase during my fertility journey. Cause I'm like, what happened for a reason? That I lost a baby? Like, you don't say that to people that have lost. Like, I hated that.
But that's the thing, and not to interrupt your thought, but like, it's nothing happens for a reason. Things just happen. So like, but
it's the road to like, and my point on this was, it's just interesting to think about. Like, my acupuncturist, who I'm still very close with, like, comes over and which is crazy because she was on this journey from the start. I'm going to have her on the podcast one of these days because I just love her. Our personalities are so similar and then also so different. Like, I think if like you walk up, you're probably like, this is an interesting match, but like we are like soul sisters destined to be like, we were destined to be friends, but couldn't be more different in some ways. But I was thinking like, what embryo do we pick for this next one? And to me, I'm superstitious. I'm this. I overthink every single thing. I consult the doctors. And she just said like, oh, I like this. Like, she's funny like that. She just has these feelings and intuition. She's like, I like this one because for whatever reason, right? And I was like, well, yeah, but. And she's like, and if it doesn't work, like that wasn't the one that was going to work. It will lead you to the one that will work. And like, that just made me think of like what you're talking about in a weird way. And it made me feel calmer. That it's not just it's not, it's meant to be, but it's just like, that's just the way life is going to play out. And it played out that we had to wait this long for Georgie. And it, like, for me, it's amazing. Like, I can't imagine my life without her. Like, if embryo 4 worked, that probably would have been amazing too. But I now know embryo 7 and I'm like, what would have happened? So I'm just like, okay, like whatever the process is, hopefully, it leads us to whatever's quote unquote meant to be, I guess.
Yeah. And it's just not, this doesn't apply, this conversation, to just
babies. It's anything.
It's sort of just, life is weird, man. I mean, how you go from thing to thing, and it really is, it's your decisions kind of, but it's chance. And, there's scientific theories about like determinism and everything's already predestined anyway. And you're sort of just acting out, the universe's plan, which is, interesting to think about. So, I don't know. I think that as long as you're not obviously hurting anyone with your views, and you're, in a case like this, bringing life into the world, then it's a good thing, I think.
Who would have thought that? You remember the book Choose Your Own Adventure? Who would have thought that fun, what I thought was like a fun, game would ever really be like what life is about? Like, I was not thinking big picture there. I was just thinking it was this, fun thing. And I'm like, the adult version of Choose Your Own Adventure is it's real, guys. All right. Well, I feel like that was a good chat.
We'll keep updating you on the surrogate.
Yeah, we will. Next month will be like full swing Christmas. But I hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving, and I feel like that was a nice get it all off your chest kind of talk. Everything's going to be okay.
All right. See you guys next time.
All right. Thanks for listening to Unexpecting the podcast. Please subscribe, leave a review, and follow Unexpecting Pod on Instagram for info about upcoming weekly episode releases.